G'day groovers, rockers, and in between. This is Vinyl Vibes. I'm your host, Jack Hodgins. Today, we are talking with founding member and guitarist of Ted Mulry Gang, Les Hall. Les grew up amongst Beatlemania in Australia in the early 60s and was greatly inspired by the guitar playing of George Harrison. In 1967, he joined a Newcastle band called the Velvet Underground. The band would eventually start playing backing for Ted Mulry, before forming Ted Mulry Gang in 1972 with Les on guitar. The band would record Jump in My Car in 1975 and it would be a #1 hit in Australia for the group. The band would go on to have 4 more top 10 singles and after 6 albums would disband in 1986. More recently, Les has got the band back together and they've released a brand new single and their first album in over 30 years. G'day Les and welcome to Vinyl Vibes.
Thank you, mate. Nice to be here.
And great to have you here. And look, let's just start off at the beginning. I mean, I read you were born in Maitland, 1948. Do you remember much about growing up in Maitland?
I can remember back very early in 1949 when I was 1 year old and there was a flood and the water was coming in over the carpet in the house I was living in at the time. And I remember being quite terrified by it. Dad was very musical. He had a pianola. Well, Dad used to sit there and pedal on the pianola and he had a ton of rolls. I'm being very careful about my language here. He had lots and lots of rolls. And one of them was Darktown Strutter's Ball, which we'll touch on later, I'm sure. But apart from that, there was Ragtime Band. You know, just he had very good pitch. I can remember hearing him sing. I can still hear his voice in the back of my head. And they're no longer with us, neither mum or dad. But now when I think about it, he had absolutely no musical training, but his pitching was really, really good.
The 50s, I mean, the rock and roll started around 1955, 56, maybe 54. Do you recall those early rock and roll records?
Hated it with a passion. That's the truth. I could not stand it. At high school, most of the music we were doing was classical. And I was really hooked on things like Tchaikovsky. I still love listening to the 1812. There's a lot of classical stuff I really, really like. And when the American pop, and we've got to be careful here, came out, and the reason I'm being careful is because American as opposed to the English, which I drool over. So there's a big difference to me between the American stuff and the English stuff. I didn't get me at all. Elvis, yeah, wonderful. The girls were yelling, but didn't do much for me. And none of the stuff did until I heard a couple of songs by a Liverpool band, and that was it.
I'm guessing that was the Beatles?
Oh, what a bloody good guess. That took a lot of effort, didn't it?
I did. I had to think about it, like Liverpool.
Right. Mate, Jerry and the Pacemakers, Brian Pillman, the Tremolos, all of those early bands that came out of that era, they all influenced, and they were great, but especially the Beatles, who I got to see in 1964 with my neighbour. And just recently when Herman from the band said to me, "You're going to see Paul McCartney?" I said, well, last time I saw him, he was with John and George and Ringo, so it'd be a bit of a letdown. No, I don't think I'll bother this time. Now, that's as pretentious as they get, mate.
Well, do you recall much about that concert at all?
There's a couple of things I recall about it. The first thing was when they were heading down to the stage, the aisle that they were running down was lined by police, and you could only just see the top of their heads. But I hadn't realised how short they were, and or how tall our police force were at the time. But you just saw the top of their heads bobbling as they went down and got on stage. And from then on, the screaming was just never ending. But if you put your hand or your fingers in your ears and blocked them, you could hear them. And it was just mind-blowing. They were so good. They were identical to the records, what you could hear. The guitar playing, the singing, the harmonies, everything. They were a really good, tight band.
And of course, I've read that they inspired you to pick up the guitar because you were playing piano before that. Am I correct on that?
You're 100% correct. You've done your research brilliantly. Dad didn't make me. He said, look, I'll pay for piano lessons for you, okay? Now, here's the problem. I do everything by ear. So when it came to learning classical piano, I got through a couple of years of piano forte and so on. But basically, I was playing everything that I learned by ear. I gave up reading completely because I realized my ear was pretty good. And after a while, my teacher realized that and she started taking the sheet music away and saying, now play it, and I'd play it. And she'd say, right, I'm not counting that. You're not passing. And things got very hard. My brother was given an acoustic guitar. And this is after I'd done piano for about 2 years. And I knew he wasn't going to do anything with it. And I said to Dad, look, can I learn the guitar instead? And he said, no, if you want to take up the guitar, you teach yourself, and I'm going to stop the piano lesson. So I said, great, okay, all right, we'll do that. And that's exactly what we did.
In teaching yourself, like, was that listening to the records and then trying to play what they played? Like, is that how you went about it?
That, and there were a lot of magazines out at the time, good colour magazines, and you could get photos of George Harrison with his Country Gentleman and see where his fingers were on the fretboard. And that's how I learned to play bar chords. And I learnt the D chord down on the second fret with pictures. I learnt the bottom E chord. I learned the open G chord. I learned lots of guitar chords from watching pictures of George Harrison and John Lennon in magazines.
Would you say that learning it that way has made you a better guitar player?
I don't think I'm a great guitar player, mate, but I think what it did was it gave me some advantages because I did have a pretty good ear. So I was able to pick up stuff as opposed to some of my contemporaries at the time who were reliant on the sheet music, which always tended to be wrong and come out late.
A few years later, I think we're probably talking more like 4 or 5 years later, in 1968, you joined a local band, Newcastle band, the Velvet Underground. Tell me how did that come to be? How did you join them?
I was in a Maitland band, and they were called the Influence of Cecil Rhodes, and who was the guy who did something about the Suez Canal, if I remember correctly. It was a great band, and I really enjoyed playing it. But this drummer from Velvet Underground kept hounding me and saying, look, come to Newcastle, Big Smoke. I know it's a big step for you, and it's away from Maitland, and it's away from your comfort zone and all the rest of it. But, you will enjoy it. You'll be playing to bigger crowds and blah, 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 blah. And I fell for it. So I learnt later that the main reason he wanted me to join the band was because I had a Vox AC30, the same as George Harrison was using, and I had a Gretsch Chet Atkins Country Gentleman. It was one of the few in the state, let alone the country at the time, $775 back in those days. Work it out. It's about 20 grand these days. So it was a big investment for me, but that's what got me into the band. I was working at David Jones in Newcastle, and that's how I afforded to buy the guitar.
Velvet Underground, playing around the Newcastle era. I mean, what do you remember of playing Newcastle back in those like late 60s kind of era? Yeah.
Okay. How can I do this delicately? We had a van. The van had a mattress. No, we're not going there. Okay. I remember, let's put it this way, learning lots of things for the first time, learning how to, the value it had, playing a guitar in a band to people at the time. For some reason, that won you a few brownie points, girls especially. And it was a whole different experience from coming from Maitland to going into Newcastle, which to me was kind of the big smoke. We had a guy called Steve Phillipson who used to put lighter fluid on his arms, set himself on fire, and we played Jimi Hendrix' song Fire to it and blah, blah. How predictable was that? But it worked, and we moved from Newcastle to Sydney.
I've heard you played King's Cross a lot back then. I mean, that would have been pretty wild back then.
Oh, okay. My filter is happening here. Yep, okay. We can do this. It was very different. We were playing in a nightclub called Down Under. We were sharing it with the band who would later become Sherbet. I remember talking to Clive Shakespeare, who has since passed away, and a few of the guys from Sherbet. Darryl was not in the band at the time. They would do the day shift. We would do the night shift, and we were living at Wollongong at the time. So we'd drive into Sydney, into King's Cross, and start our session at 6, and then we'd finish at midnight and drive back to Wollongong. Not a great existence, but that's how you lived in bands in those days.
Moving forward in time a bit here, I think the later part of 1972, Ted Mulry started using you guys as his backing band. Am I right on that?
Yep. Actually, what happened, it was about, Ted got over here in 70, and we saw him at a gig somewhere or other, and he was being backed by a band called Elm Tree at the time. And then later on, we did back him, and he said to me, look, I'd really like an MD, somebody who could travel around with me, and when I've got to do gigs, could rehearse with the band and make sure they're in tune and all the rest of it, so I don't have to worry about any of that. He said, "Are you interested?" I went, yeah, okay. So we did Cloudland in Victoria, and we did the opening of the West Point Casino in Tassie or Hobart, and did quite a few gigs. I realised later it was no glory gig at all. It was because Ted was too bloody lazy to do it, and he just wanted me to get out and suffer it with some of those young guys who had trouble tuning up, let alone playing the songs. But somehow we got through it, and some of them were very good too.
I mean, in those days, were you playing a lot of Ted's solo stuff with him? Like, was that the kind of stuff?
Yeah, we did Falling in Love Again, and I'd do that down, 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 down at the start of Falling in Love Again, and we did Julia and Marsha and quite a few of his songs. And it was during that period, actually, when we'd get back to Sydney, where the whole band would get together, well, parts of Velvet Underground at the time. And Herman, the drummer, said to Ted, "Look, rather than doing this, why don't we just form a band?" Ted thought about it for the best part of 10 seconds and went, "Yep, let's do that." And that's how we formed TMG. And the very first thing we did as a band was a couple of cruises around the South Pacific. One of them was to New Zealand and back, and the other one was over to the west coast of the US, up to Vancouver and back.
Because I've read the first official TMG gig was at a festival in Newcastle. Am I right? Or I think September 2nd, 1972.
Matara Festival.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah. And that was kind of different for us. But of course, in those days, we were just doing Ted stuff. There was nothing that was band stuff. So it was mainly an electrification of Falling in Love Again and Julia and those sort of things. Plus, we did a few other things that we liked. The odd Stones song, maybe a Status Quo, and maybe a song by an English band called Free, things like that, all of which later influenced our songwriting a hell of a lot.
When did you start writing with him? Because you guys collaborated a bit, like during your time with Ted and TMG. I mean, when did you start kind of collaborating?
On the Ocean Monarch, on our way to New Zealand the very first time. We just started just jamming songs. So I'd just start playing a riff or playing some chords, and everyone would play along, and we came up with probably half of the very first album doing that, and that sort of emboldened me a little bit. We were back in Sydney, and look, Herman and I are at loggerheads about this, but I don't care what he says. It happened at Coleroy Plateau. I was in the bedroom. I just listened to a Faces song called Stay With Me, which I really love the feel of. It's a very Stonesy feel, actually. And I was listening to that, and that finished, and I was fiddling on the guitar and came up with this riff. And I went out to Ted, who was in the lounge room watching TV, and said, "Hey, have a listen to this." And I played it. He went and got his bass, and he followed, and we came up with the thing that ended up as Jump in My Car. That was a major collaboration.
Of course, by this point, you guys were a three-piece, right?
Yeah, so Ted was playing bass instead of rhythm. And to anyone who is in a three-piece band, I commiserate, guys. It's really tough as a guitarist in a three-piece band. You've got to be on the ball all the time. You've got to kind of fill it out, or you've got to do a Police type thing and have a nice strummy thing happening with a chorus effect or something to be able to make it sound valid. It's so much easier when you've got another guitar in the band.
So Jump in My Car, that was written on one of the cruises, was it? Or was that?
No, that was written back in the bedroom I was sitting in the bedroom playing in Coleroy Plateau.
Okay, and did it come together pretty quickly? Like the lyrics, or because
musically it came back to like you write songs?
I do.
Right. Okay. So if I say I use the Roman numeral method of MML 2050 or music, melody, lyrics, you'll know the progression I'm talking about. Start with the music, then come up with a melody that works with the music, and then the lyrics to go with the music, go with the melody. And that's I don't know if you've seen that Beatles special, but McCartney did exactly the same thing when he wrote Get Back. So I think it's a pretty common way of doing it, and that's how we used to work. And Jump in My Car, same deal. The music first. The melody is basically in the music. So, down, 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 down. What are you going to sing to that?
Yeah.
So, it was all there. But Ted came up with the not his original draft of music.
I've heard this. Yeah. The lyrics are a bit less radio friendly, perhaps.
Less radio friendly. Man given to understatement. Okay. Yeah, very much. But it was to get his rhyming. He would just do it for the rhyming pattern, and you can think of all sorts of things to rhyme with truck, of course, and
absolutely.
It works in your melody. So you know what your rhyming pattern is going to be. And apparently there's a few guys around who are very successful, like Ed Sheeran, who write exactly the same way. They don't necessarily do a lot of expletive deleteds, but they do keep in mind their phonetics as to where their rhyming pattern wants to go.
I was thinking about this as well. I mean, because Ted was signed to Albert Productions, and through his... So you got signed through Ted, or how did the band get signed? I'm just thinking, yeah.
You were right the first time. It weren't broke, so why did we want to fix it? We went, yep, okay, we'll sign. Where's the piece of paper? Naively. Have you ever heard of a contract in perpetuity?
No, I haven't. I don't think I have.
Well, we signed one.
Yeah.
And of course, that meant it's just forever, which these days is completely illegal. Even with a record contract now, I think it's a maximum of about 25 years. But and I can absolutely assure you that the percentages we got with the copyright was nowhere near the percentages you get these days.
Ted Albert produced the record. I mean, what was he like to work with?
Ted was a lovely man. He'd just done hits with Billy Thorpe and the Aztecs, and more especially the Easy Beats. When we did Jump in My Car, I actually hated the sound he wanted me to get for the guitar solo in the middle, which was essentially the middle position on the pickups. So I was using both, and I wanted to go the other way and get something really grungy, but Ted wasn't really into that. He was into the cleaner sounds that he'd been doing with the Easy Beats. Now, he's not around for me to double check this with these guys, but I just got the vibe that was the kind of sounds that he was used to, and that's what he wanted to hear. But he was a lovely guy. He was very helpful. Yeah, I had quite a lot of interaction with Ted. Because
you were a trio at the time when recording that first album, when you were kind of doing your guitar parts, did you record the rhythm and then do your lead as an overdub, or how did all that work?
As a matter of fact, with Jump in My Car, Ted did the rhythm.
Okay.
Then he did the bass. Then I did the lead, my riffs, and then I did the guitar solo over it. I think it was only about an 8-track recorder that we did that on. It was something very small. So it wasn't like you had tracks to spare.
I think it was the stereo version I was listening to, and it sounds like there's 2 different guitar tracks. Did Ted do 2 different guitar tracks? They just sound different in each year. I don't know, maybe I'm just my ears, but do you recall anything like that?
No.
Okay.
I only recall him doing the one, but you have tweaked my attention now, and I'm going to listen to something that I haven't listened to for probably 30 years. Thanks for that. And I'll see if there is anything extraneous on it. But no, I know I was doing the rhythm as well. Underneath the riffy parts, but no, I only recall him doing the one take.
Okay.
Of rhythm.
Well, do you recall what kind of guitars you were using, amps? Yeah,
we were playing down at Tathra, which I say down at Tathra. It's down the south coast. It's around or north of Bega. It's somewhere around Bateman's Bay area. And as we were coming back, we stopped at a servo just to grab something to drink. And there were some surfies there, and they had a van, and they said to us, "Oh, you guys in the band?" And I said, Yeah. He said to me, "Do you want to buy a guitar?" And I said, "What sort of guitar?" He said, "A brown one." I went, "Okay." So can I see the brown guitar? So he went and got the case, and it was a brown Gibson ES335 semi-acoustic. And I said, "How much do you want for it?" He said, "Oh, $200. I said, "I'm sorry, mate, I've only got 150 on me." He said, "That'll do." So I bought the guitar for 150. Being naive and stupid, it never occurred to me that it may have been stolen. And I recorded the first album, and I recorded Jump in My Car with that guitar through a Marshall. At the time, I had a 50-watt Marshall.
Sunday Evenings, the first single, that's another one that has a Beatles sound to it. I mean, who chose for that to be the single? Because I don't think it did particularly well charting wise, but who Was that the record company, or was it the band?
It was a record company, and it was that was kind of a cross between the Beatles and a band called The Move, who later became ELO, I think. And that had that sort of that vibe about it. A lovely little song, but yeah, you're right. As a single, it did absolutely nothing. And I think Ted Albert would have liked that because of the melody. Well, that was the single. When we started searching for another single, the album had come out, and we had a guy called Barry Chapman, who was a DJ in Newcastle at 2NX at the time. Ted and I had met him, ironically, when Ted was doing West Point Casino. And we happened to meet Barry and Lee Simons, another famous DJ from the period, down in. They were working together in Hobart, and Barry had now moved up to Newcastle, and he heard the album, and he picked up on the track called "Jump in My Car," and he started playing that, and started getting a response from it. And he rang up Ted and said, "Man, you've got to release "Jump in My Car" as a single." We thought he was nuts, but we went, okay. So we went into Albert's. We went down and we went up and saw Ted Albert and said, we're told that this should be the single. And he said, well, go down and talk to, and I won't mention names. And we went down and talked to this other person. He said, well, what did Ted say? And we said, well, Ted said it was okay if you said it was okay. He went, okay, we got the go-ahead, and it was released as a single. But it was all because of a DJ in Newcastle.
Do you remember when you were told it had gone to number one for the first time? Like, does that memory pop up for you?
I do remember, and I remember hearing it on the radio for the first time, and both were a really great buzz to any musician, I don't know about these days because with streaming, it's almost hard to say, but in those days, it was great. You felt like you'd achieved something. And I remember having a conversation with a politician who will also remain nameless, who was saying, it'll be forgotten in blah, blah years' time. And I said to him, well, it's quite possible that in time to come, if you ask somebody if they remember a song called Jump in My Car, they'll say yes. And then if you ask them who the Premier of New South Wales was that year, I'll bet they haven't got a bloody clue.
I think that's a great comeback on your part. No, that's a fair.
Well, he did go quiet.
I could imagine. No, that's great. No, that's a great. No, I love that. I think it was during that process of that song becoming number one, you became a four-piece again with Gary Dixon on second guitar.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, how did that? I'd imagine that would have changed the sound, and that it would have been a bigger sound by having a second guitar, like playing live and all that.
Well, live, definitely. As I mentioned earlier, the burden on the guitarist in a three-piece band was no longer there, and you're much freer to experiment and do different things. And Gaz, very competent electric guitarist and very competent guitarist, great on acoustic as well. So and we poached him from a band that was out in the western suburbs, and Fat Harry, I think the band was, and he worked with us for many years.
During the success of Jump in My Car, you guys got to play on Countdown, and you got to play on Countdown quite a lot of times. But I mean, do you remember what do you remember of those Countdown days? Like going to the ABC studios, I think it was at. Like, what do you remember of those days?
There's a few things I remember. One is the canteen that was down in the studio in Melbourne. It was great. It was like there was something like 5 tables in a row, and then there was something like 5 rows of 5 tables. And when you went into the canteen, all of the guys that were on the show and the girls that were on the shows that particular day would be spread out. So you'd be talking to all sorts of people, and lots of people that you didn't know. And it was great to have conversations with other people. And I met lots of guys there that I hadn't known before, as I'd just seen them on TV. And you start chatting with them, and suddenly they become human, and you can put their character, and when you see them on TV next time, you know exactly who they are. And I enjoyed that process. I enjoyed the interaction there. I also enjoyed the, okay, guys, you're on, and going on and just miming to the record as we did with Countdown. And that took a lot of pressure off. Didn't matter if you made mistakes. Ted was the only one that was doing anything live.
And listening to the second album and compared to the first album, there's obviously that, I think there's that change from, like, there's not a lot of 60s, not a lot of 60s inspired sounds on the second, not directly anyway on the second one. I think would you say that this band became more confident in that raw 12-bar kind of sound on the second album, like more confident in that? Yeah.
Absolutely. And you can hear, look, if I can tell you now that my personal influences were the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, Free, and Status Quo. That's if whenever I write stuff, it's a conglomerate of different percentages of those influences, basically, and those influences started to come out more and more as we recorded over time, and you'll hear that we did become a little bit more emphatic about how we didn't know what we were doing necessarily. Yeah. But because we always had an engineer, but you'd say, hey, can you make this brighter? Can you give it a bit more grunge? Can we do this? Can you do that? Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't.
Because did you guys produce that second album yourselves? Like TMG produced that album?
No, we had a guy. It was kind of co-produced between ourselves and the engineer at the time.
Okay, right, okay. And I mean, was that a different dynamic to working with Ted Albert?
With Ted Albert, there was only one boss in the room. But when you were working with an engineer, and I think actually, I remember, what was his name? Bruce Brown at Albert's did a lot of the production work on some of those early albums, and George and Harry came in when we were recording Darktown Strutter's Ball, and they were there with adding their bits and pieces too with some of the stuff. So we had some great help.
Yeah, and of course you mentioned Darktown Strutter's Ball there, and I was doing some reading. I think it was based off a song written in 1917 or something like that. I mean, like, how did you guys take that song that was from 1917 and make it a big hit in 1976? Like, what was the process there?
First and foremost, it was all about the melody. Ted remembered it because his parents used to sing it. I remembered it because, as I mentioned, Dad had a pianola. He used to play it a lot on the pianola. So both he and I knew what the melody was. It was pretty easy to put a chord progression to it. And then we just gave it a bit of a Quo-ish type feel. And as a matter of fact, and I guess I feel safe saying this now, but I never used to mention in the past, there was a Status Quo song called Backwater. And if you ever get a chance to hear it, it's got a riff through it, dum, 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 and so on. But in the very middle, it stops. And all of a sudden, one of them, I don't know if it's Parfitt or Rossi, goes da-da-dum, dum, da-da-da, and goes back into the song. I remember hearing that. I thought, oh, that's wasted in the middle. That'll make a great start to the song. So when we went to do Darktown Strutter's Ball, guess what we started off with? And that's how it all came together.
You guys were working pretty hard in 1976 as well. I mean, I think you got 2 albums out, and you also were touring nationally. And I mean, yeah, in saying that, I mean, that national tour 1976, that was when you played the Harbour Bridge, right, on the float?
That was great. It was really, really good fun. And it was a very different experience too, because when you play open air, the acoustics are completely different because there are no acoustics. The sound's just going, and that was one of the first times I think we'd actually done an open air thing on that scale. But yeah, it was really good. The reaction was really good, and it made a great film clip, which incidentally was synced up to the record. So when you see the thing, if you think it sounds remarkably like the record, well, you're damn all right.
Jamaican Rum off that album. I mean, that it's such a unique song for TMG. And I mean, how did you guys go about that one? Because I mean, it's just such a unique song for it's for that 12-bar blues stuff to Jamaican Rum. It's just such a different song for you guys. Yeah, how did you go about that? Yeah.
Well, that one again, it's an open E guitar.
Open E, yep.
And it was a riff I came up with, and I really liked the riff, but I didn't know what to do with it. And sometimes you never know whether to speed things up or slow them down or whatever. But that just didn't work if you sped it up too much. So we left it down where it was, and then again down, down, down. The melody's all in the riff, so it wasn't so hard with the melody. And Ted came up with the idea of the lyric, and the film clip for that we shot at North Head, I think it's called. It's on a beach right up near Pittwater, and it's a beautiful little beach. It's on an isthmus, and there's palm trees there, and it really looks tropical. So that's where it was chosen as the location for it, and the the thing came out looking really quite good and quite deceiving. It did look as though you're in Jamaica or the West Indies or somewhere. That song, it's a polarizing song. It's one of those songs that you go, this is not a TMG song. Ted and I decided many, many years ago, anything we wrote was TMG, provided the band could play it convincingly. If the band was able to play it, then it became a TMG song. If we couldn't play it for whatever reason, we scrapped it or gave it away, and it was not a TMG song. And in that case, we decided to include it because it was a ballady type thing, and we didn't have many. Some people think it's really good, really pretty. Other people think it's the worst thing TMG ever did.
So you would say, like, in your collaboration with Ted, you were more the music kind of person and he was more the
I was the music melody. He was definitely the lyrics. Sometimes I did the music and he'd do a different melody to it. There's some stuff that will never never be heard in daylight that we did at Albert's. And there was one song in particular that we were both contracted to Albert's as writers. And I wrote one particular song, which I loved the melody. I loved the music, hated the lyric, gave it to Ted. And it ended up being called You're Gonna Miss Me When I'm Gone. And it's a beautiful song. And it's the best collaboration, in my opinion, that we ever did. But nobody's ever going to hear it. It's on the archives. But yeah, when we got back to Sydney, we got straight in the studio. Well, we had that song Without You to start with. And then we started working off other things, and we did what we always did. And try and come up with a riff or something to start it, or Ted would have an idea and he'd play something on bass and I'd convert it to guitar and away we'd go.
After that album, 1977, you did another national tour. I mean, did you enjoy the constant touring? Like, I mean, was it pretty, like, full on for you? Or, like, how did you, like, take me through that.
This is what it's like. Oh, well, wait a minute. I'll give you a little anecdote first. It was on the Round Australian 80 Days tour. Actually, we were in Sale in Victoria and we were all travelling on a coach. And Sherbet and ourselves were on the one coach. And, of course, we got thrown out of the hotel or motel at 10 o'clock. We'd get into the coach and away we'd go. We'd be gone by about 20 past 10. On this occasion, Ted, Herman and myself were on the coach. Half of Sherbet were on the coach, but Gary wasn't. And there was the usual collection of young ladies in their school uniforms on their way to school, milling around the side of the coach. And one of them yelled out to Ted, "Where's Gary?" And Ted said, and I'm quoting here, "He's in his room having a shit." And the girl looked up at him, and this is the truth. And she said, "Does he do that?"
Right.
Now,
yeah.
Put that in context. These people are seeing these guys, for the first time. Usually it's only ever on television. This young lady, for some reason, imagined that there was something not human about guys in band. So, that was both an eye-opener and incredibly scary all at once. In Melbourne, we could not use taxis, we could not use hire cars because the girls used to dent the roofs. So it ended up in Melbourne when we usually stayed at the Southern Cross in those days in Melbourne. They ended up forcing us to use an armoured car to travel to the gigs because it didn't matter how hard they belted on the sides, it wasn't going to damage the vehicle. But the taxi drivers just refused to take us. But what we did do, there was one occasion again on the Round Australian 80 Days tour where we're in Melbourne, and Roger rang up one of the jean shops. I don't know who, I don't think it was one of your regulars these days that you see. It was just a jean shop, and asked the owner if they would mind opening up on a Tuesday night at 8:30 so the two bands could go in and do some shopping. And they very kindly said yes, because you simply could not walk down the main street. It wasn't a very safe thing to do. The only time that happened to us outside of Melbourne was in Adelaide when we were doing a thing at a shopping centre, and we had to go down an escalator and then go out to get in the cars. They were expecting about 50 people there. And look, I don't know what the final figure was. It was 300 and something. And they tend to get, when they know you're going, they tended to get vicious or desperate, I suppose would be the correct word. And I remember Gary, they grabbed the chain he had around his neck, ripped it off, and he got quite a bad mark around his neck. And he looked back, and I thought he was going to try and retrieve it. And I said, "Gaz, forget it. quick, run. And that's what we did. And there were the four of us, and we went straight out to the car, jumped in and got as far away from there as we possibly could. Now, that would have been, there was somebody there reporting it. And that was, we were told, oh, that's going to be on the front page tomorrow, guys. That was the same day that there was a shooting in Hoddle Street, I think, in Adelaide, and that was all over the front page and the second page and the third page. And if you went to page 5, there was a small section about what happened to this band, which is now completely insignificant compared to people being shot on Hoddle Street. So, it's all about timing.
Locked In 1980 was the last SteamG album with Ted, and I think his band went on a hiatus in 1986. And take me through, like, what inspired, well, not inspired, but what made the band decide to go on hiatus? Like, what was, like, was it just the music was changing, like the industry was changing kind of thing?
It was a combination of things. It was, the industry was changing. Ted went overseas for a while, to Los Angeles, and he was trying to get something to happen over there. And I got a job back here because by that stage I was married, and I had a young son, so you need an income. Yep. And so I did have a studio with Herm for a while. Herm still got Ramrod Studio in Sydney, and he and I had a studio at Brookvale, which was also called Ramrod, but it was just too much travelling from Maitland down to Brookvale. It was all the time, so I ended up selling out, and didn't think about it for a while. Didn't even touch the guitar for quite a while, and it was look, to be honest with you, I didn't even listen to music for about maybe 12 or 18 months. I just got burnt out, and not only that, working in the studio a lot, you become very analytical. You're listening to every nuance, especially when it's vocals, because in those days we didn't have Melodyne or auto-tune. So if somebody sang a flat note, you had to be on the ball and say, look, yeah, a little bit under there, so let's have another go at that melody. I think I'd got burnt out. I don't know. Herm kept going in the studio. Gary had left by this time, I think, and was working in other bands, and Ted was overseas. So, and it was when he came back, we got back together again and decided to try recording something. We did that back with Alberts again. It didn't work. And when I listen to it now, it's too complex as far as the melody is concerned. But still, we had fun, and it gave us a reason to get back together and start playing again. But Gaz was not in the band then. We were using various other people. Ted started getting ill, and towards the end of the 90s, we noticed something, and he had a tumor on his brain taken out at one stage, and we thought all was well, and then discovered it had come back again. And that was, of course, we were no longer working then, and it was a horrible period for Ted, obviously, but for us it was not fun either. Lo and behold, in 2016, all of a sudden we started getting requests to do some work, and we thought, wait a minute, we haven't even got a bloody band. So we rang Steve, asked him if he'd be interested. He said, yep. Herm was still available. We called Gaz and said, would you be interested in coming back and doing some of the others? Yep, no problem. Now we just need the bass player. So initially we were using Mark Evans from AC/DC, and Mark came on the road with us for quite a while. And then he had prior commitments, and we got Tony Mitchell from Sherbet. Small world, isn't it? Yeah. And so Tony has been working with us and worked on the new album with us as well.
Yeah, and of course I wanted to bring up that new album. It is what it is. Rock On, great title as well. I heard you wrote all the songs for that. Like, take me through the process in making that. Yeah, making this album. Like, how long has it been in the making? Yeah.
Initially, it was not intended to be a Team G album. I was just writing. I was getting it out of my system, writing a bunch of songs. Again, all of my influences, all as they always were. The original demos, I did everything: the drums, the bass, guitars, and the vocals. And I'm a crap vocalist, let me tell you. So I wasn't all that happy with the way they sounded. But I thought, there's some different songs here. So I played them for Herm, and he said, why don't you come down and we'll record them properly? So once they were done, Herm got a friend of his in who used to work for Sony and said, have a listen to these. And as his name happened to be Tony as well, as Tony was leaving the room, he turned around and said to Herm, Lala is the single. Well, okay. So that's what happened there. Now, as for the writing, it was the same deal. The single La La, it came from, the riff actually, I listened to a variety of music. I was listening to electronic stuff, which I really like. I like trance stuff. I like a lot of really heavy synthesizers. And I was listening to this thing and the riff was going, dun, 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 dun. I thought, wow, that sounds really good. And then I thought to myself, wait a minute, I wonder if that'll work on guitar. So I tried it on guitar. And I thought, okay, that works. Now it needs something to play over it, but it's got to be a really simple riff. Mm-hmm. So I tried several things, ended up with a 12-string type thing. The riff does not go with a melody. It's simply a riff. That's all it is. So I left that as alone, and then decided the melody had to carry on from that, and that's the way the rest of it was written. The inspiration from the lyrics was Narcos, a show on Netflix. I noticed that when you're watching Narcos or any of those drug-related shows, be they Mexico or Patagonia or wherever, you always see the very scantily clad young ladies draped over the lounges in the background, waiting to be used and abused by the guys who, are in the foreground inevitably. And I thought, geez, what a life. And that's where the whole genesis of the lyric came from, and the melody. Or not the melody, but the lyric.
Is it going to come out in vinyl or CD? Is it good?
I believe the album will be released on both vinyl and CD.
Fantastic. Well, that'll be great. And will there be another tour at all supporting that album, maybe?
Mate, at this stage, I don't know. I know Steve's pretty heavily booked out because he's doing some shows with some other guys, and that keeps him busy up. We did have the opportunity to do something on New Year's Eve, but he's busy, so we couldn't do that. But there is talks of things starting next year, so we'll just have to wait and sit and see and grow older in the meantime.
Well, Les, it sounds all fantastic, and thanks for making the time today. It's been fantastic.
That's not a problem. I hope I haven't bored the shit out of you, but it's been great talking to you.
That was guitarist and founding member of Ted Mulry Gang, Les Hall. To keep up with TMG, head to their website at tedmulrygang.com. Remember to share this episode with other music fans. And if you really enjoyed this edition, let us know. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Vinyl Vibes. And to all you music lovers out there, stay groovy.